Not saying that that's not something Russ Smith could do, because he's a guy that used to freaking house Waffle House and then go drop 30. We're here for another edition of the Starting 502 Podcast, powered by the State of Louisville Podcast Network and brought to you by Mr. and Mrs. Bourbon. And if you haven't tried Mr. and Mrs. yet, you're going to be able to get some because they will be the exclusive bourbon provider there at Freedom Hall for the Louisville Regional. Speaking of which, as well, before we get into roster construction and everything, if you're not aware, if you haven't listened to other podcasts, if you're not on social media, there is a significant battle going on as far as ticket sales for the first round. Whoever sells more tickets, Louisville versus Bellarmine, or Kentucky versus, who's Kentucky play in the first round? Whoever their opening round opponent is, it's like 305 Mafia, I think. I'm assuming
that's 305 Ballers.
305 Ballers. And I don't know if they're associated with Miami Hurricanes or just Miami in general. Regardless, whoever sells more tickets to their game, if Louisville advances to the round of 8 and Kentucky advances to the round of 8, whoever has sold more tickets in that first round game will have home court advantage. So that's huge, because I don't want to drive to Lexington for a game if that's what happens. So, but yeah, I mean, today we just want to get into, what the roster construction looks like, and if Louisville has a legitimate chance at winning this thing. I think we thought they did last year, and I mean, based on their play for 2 5/8, 2 3/4 games. I would say that they had the talent and the wherewithal to make a deep run in that tournament. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Jake? I mean, are you more excited about this year's roster than last year's roster?
I don't know if I'd say more excited, because we were so down last year as a basketball fan base, and that was like the only hope in life that I had. And it was the first time. So
Right.
from an excitement standpoint, I would say maybe just a little less excited, but that's just only because it was the first time and we were so down bad a year ago to this date. But in terms of excitement for can we win a championship, yes, even more excited. I mean, we saw last year we have a team that can win, should have won 3 games, and now we've got 70% of that roster that now has TBT experience, and we've added a couple of incredible players to the team. So yeah, excitement-wise, when it comes to can we win this, can this team win $1 million? Hell yes.
This podcast is not just about the podcast, right? It's about the friends you make along the way. And we saw something, a week ago, Jake, 10 days ago on the site. David Johnson just magically appeared on the Louisville TBT roster. And Jake was like, dude, this would be awesome if we could get the scoop on this story. And we reached out to a few people and we said, hey, we saw David Johnson's on the TBT roster. Was that a mistake? Or and they were just like, you didn't see David Johnson on the TBT roster. I don't know what we were talking
what
about.
Are you talking about?
Like, no, you didn't. But it's been made official. This morning, it was officially announced that David Johnson will be joining the Ville TBT roster. A guard that probably was severely underappreciated because of what happened in his time at U of L. But maybe the most prolific player on this roster. The second player kind of just coming right off of a NBA contract, basically, right? He still has a legitimate chance to be on a roster and play legitimate minutes in the NBA. And only a few years removed from college, still pretty young. I'd say he's 23, 24 years old. So a great addition for Louisville, in my opinion. I mean, when you talk about, Peyton Sieve, Russ Smith up front, or, at the guard positions, then you add Chris Jones in, a guy who is versatile, aggressive, prolific, great defender, excellent shooter, has improved even more since his time at U of L. And then you throw in David Johnson to the mix. I mean, that's 4 legitimate starters at the point guard or 2 guard position. Louisville's low. I mean, there's no way there's a roster with 4 guards as good as the Ville has, right?
Impossible. No.
Yeah, I mean, it, I would have to scour some of these rosters, and again, there's a lot of these teams that are comprised of players who were or are still quality professional basketball players. They just didn't all play for the same team, so it's kind of hard to compartmentalize that, right? Because they're really just coming together for a few games essentially. So it's hard to piece that together if you had a guy that played for George Mason and then another guy that played for Ohio State and another guy that played for Florida International or whatever. They were probably all great players in their own right in college, and it probably have improved even more as a pro. But then when you sit there and try to break down the roster, it's a lot easier to compartmentalize it when you have Russ Smith, guy who has his number retired at Louisville, Peyton Siva, national champion, two-time Big East tournament MVP, Chris Jones, a guy that was a free throw away from leading Louisville to a Final Four, and David Johnson, a guy who is probably the best pro prospect to play at U of L since Donovan Mitchell, I'd say. So, that is a quality backcourt for U of L. I mean, does that just give you even more confidence and inspire more hope that this is a roster that can kind of make it all the way?
Yeah, I think I mean, if he could just be maybe like 6'7" and a true wing, I think he would have been the just ultimate perfect addition. Like if we could
Right.
have added like Jordan Nwora, something like that. But obviously he's still playing in the league. But I think he gives us the versatility. I think you could start or end during the Elam ending with Russ, Chris Jones, David Johnson at the three. Like I think you could do that and get away with it because he's so tall and he's so long, sitting at 6'4" with like a 6'7", 6'8" wingspan. I think most thing I'm excited about is I watched some of his games from the G League. He's playing for the Memphis Hustle, Memphis Elite. What is
Mm-hmm.
that team name? Memphis Hustle, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
dude is a sharpshooter now. I know his freshman year at Louisville, he was the furthest thing from it. Second year he came up, was like a high 30% three-point shooter. Dude shot over 40% from three this year on 8.1 three-point attempts. Like is a
Yeah.
knockdown three-point shooter now. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to see how his game has grown. And honestly, I think that's a huge thing that we needed. Peyton, not a great three-point shooter, never really has been. Russ in spurts. Chris Jones, okay shooter. You got Kyle who can shoot threes, but I think this team really was missing just a lockdown, wide open three, count it kind of guy.
Yeah, I think as they started off last year, um, it takes a second to kind of get into the game, right? Like it's kind of a weird setup because if you play in the NCAA tournament, this is structured just like the NCAA tournament, right? With the exception of you played 30 to 35 games before you're entering the NCAA tournament. Uh, and then this is, win or go home, right? Just like the NCAA tournament. So it's like you're playing your first game of the season, but if you lose, then it's your last game of the season. So it was a weird adjustment, difficult to acclimate, probably, for some of these guys coming in and trying to, play aggressive and get it done right away last season, right? And I think no more did that kind of show through than with Kyle Keurig. That's a guy that we were really excited about last season, that he was an addition to this roster. And then, he was probably, I wouldn't say he was like a flop or anything. He still played quality minutes, but it wasn't what we expected. Like we expected him to be a starter and a finisher, right? And, he just never really got it going very well. I mean, hell, they threw Luke Hancock in there for a few minutes to, so
He's in broadcasting shape.
yes, exactly. So, um, I think this year that could be a guy that people are sleeping on, right? Because of his performance last year. I mean, really, Nick Mayo was the guy who stepped it up. I mean, if you're talking about who the best player on the team was a season ago, it's a toss up between a few guys, but I mean, Nick Mayo is right there as far as he had the most electrifying plays. He was the most consistent all around player. He can stretch the floor, rebound really well, finishes really well around the rim. So a guy that I'm excited for Louisville to have back. I mean, when you look across, like you said, it feels a little thin at forward, but I think that if Keurig can kind of become the guy that he was supposed to be last year and provide the production that he is in the pros, I think it should be a non-issue. And then you get into the bigs, obviously the addition of Montrezl Harrell is huge. Um,
You
I
see,
mean,
he
it
just
could
put up
be,
50 in some sort of
yeah,
like
now it
pro-am
was
tournament.
like, I watched the highlights of that and it was like,
It was street ball to the max.
yeah, it was like, basically church pickup game
Yeah.
style thing. And most of his points from his highlights were either dunks or open threes.
Hmm.
So that's not what Louisville's going to be expecting him to do in this tournament. They're going to be expecting him just to post up on the block and try to be a dominant force. You have Chinanu Wanawaku, you have Shane Bohannon, but Harrell is the guy that you know. I think that he's the game changer this year. David Johnson's an excellent addition, but adding Montrezl Harrell, 3 years ago he was the NBA Sixth Man of the Year. Um, you know, just came out in an article this week for the Players Tribune and talked about the reason why he's not in the league right now and his aspirations to get back to the league. So this is a guy with a chip on his shoulder that has some stuff to prove and whose game probably has evolved more in the other direction of what he was trying to do when he was in college, right? He came back for a third season so that he could improve his NBA draft stock, and he just was out to prove that he was a shooter because he would be an undersized five in the NBA, right? And then there was kind of mixed results his last season in college, and then when he got into the league, he really struggled to be that guy for his first 3 or 4 years. Once he just embraced the fact that he was like a six-man type of player who would fit better as an undersized NBA big man and come off the bench and be a matchup nightmare, then all of a sudden he found that secret sauce. And that's what Louisville, TBT should expect. Going into this tournament, I hope to God he's not out there shooting threes. But what do I know? He could come out and make 4 threes in a game. And but no, I mean, what do you think? Is there somebody that we're missing that we should really be discussing?
I mean, we talked about. I mean, I thought Nanu looked great last year. Kind of surprised me because he's one of those guys that, and Shane looked good too. They've been gone for so long. You're in your mind, what they used to be. They had that talent, but now they're 31, they're 32, they're
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So you never knew. But I was surprised and happily surprised by Shane and Nanu. So I mean, I think those three, Trez, Nanu, Shane, that's a great big three right there. And then we also have
Right.
Derek Walker. We think
Right.
he is on the TBT roster website. I've never heard of this man in my life. Apparently, he played for Nebraska 2 seasons
Mm-hmm.
ago
Mm-hmm.
and put up pretty decent numbers: 13.6 points per game, 7.1 rebounds, and 3.9 assists. Was the first ever Cornhusker to lead his team in points, rebounds, and assists in like decades. So really impressive college stat line, and just graduated 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Looked at his pro ball stats. He's in Spain's second largest league, which I think if you're a
Okay.
professional basketball player, Spain is got to be top three, if not top two, top one league you want to be in. So he's at the second
Right.
highest level there, averaged 5 points and 3 rebounds a game. So, I mean, nothing crazy, but can't hurt to have a fourth big like at all. Cannot complain about that. If that's our 11th best player, that's a pretty solid dude.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, if you're adding a player, it's a depth piece on this roster. I mean,
Hmm.
you hope to God nothing happens and that there's not enough foul trouble, which in TBT there rarely will be because they let them play,
Hmm.
or injury problems. I mean, that's the last thing you want in something like this where guys are just coming out and playing for the love of the game and then they end up getting hurt, right? So you're hoping that's not the case, but if this is a depth piece, I mean, that right there, that sounds like a fantastic addition based on just 2 years ago of him being in college. So again, this is a guy, he's what, 6'8", 6'9"? Is that what I
Hmm.
remember seeing? So
Yep.
um, you know, 4 assists per game. His
Crazy.
last season in college is fantastic. And then again, another guy that's a little bit younger, probably 25, 26 years old, played 5 years in college, and then this is his second year out of college. So um, I'd be lying if I told you I knew a lot about him. You told me as we were coming on, like, hey, you hear about this Derek Walker guy? And I was like, no. And then texted Jacob, and he was like, yeah, I have no idea who that is. And if Jacob doesn't know, then it's definitely like a throwback for
Yeah.
sure. So I don't know. I don't know what the connection is. If you know, help us help you, if that makes sense. Because I'm a little lost on that addition. But sometimes you just check out the website, like the David Johnson thing. You're like, oh, news to me. I had no idea.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's still one of those things. So
Yeah. I was going to say, you want to go and you want to look at this path to a potential championship, break down the bracket of who will obviously play in the first round, then possibly second,
mhm.
third, fourth, and see how legitimate this is and kind of give people an idea of dudes we're going to see in the next,
Yeah,
what,
yeah.
two,
I
three
mean,
weeks?
starting with game one, right? I mean, Bellarmine, there are no slouches. I mean, there's not going to be a team in this tournament that's not legitimate. Like, I don't know how many teams apply, but there's a lot, and they're vetted, and they're going to make sure that you're going to be able to put together and assemble a legitimate roster. Like, they don't want blowout games in this. They
Mhm.
want this to be competitive, a great TV product. Um, and that's no more is that true than with Bellarmine. I mean, they've put a lot of guys into the high level pros. Obviously, some guys that they could bring back from a national championship team. For this, what year was that they won the title? 2011, I
I
believe.
think you're right. I think you're right.
11 or 12, I want to say. But I mean, no, I mean, there's been great players coming through that program for years. And then they added some guys from, there was a guy from Utah
Hmm.
uh, as well on their team. There's some, what are your thoughts about Bellarmine? I mean, to me, you automatically think about Bellarmine. And you think about a team that's going to be disciplined, probably shoot really well,
Yeah.
uh, not turn the ball over a lot.
Shocked to hear you this, but a lot of lanky white dudes
Yeah.
on this roster, at least the ones coming from Bellarmine and that one kid from Utah. I don't know. I know more about these other teams. They've got some bigger name players that I've either heard of or playing professionally now overseas. Was kind of shocked they don't have Chris Dow. Chris Dow's on the team
Right.
last year. Isn't he from Bellarmine?
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
no,
I
no
don't know
Chris Dow
what
on the
Chris Dow's
roster.
doing. I
He
don't know if
played
it's
really
like
well
Earl
last year,
Clark.
though.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He played really well for us last year. I'm
Yeah,
just
he
shocked they didn't
did.
add him.
Yeah. I when it was became apparent that he wasn't going to be added. That was my first thought was like, oh, well, Bellarmine has a team this year. He'll be on that team. So
Yeah.
maybe it's something where it might be a late addition. I don't know.
Yeah, but this team, I think, like you said, I think we know what to expect. They're going to play
Mhm.
a Bellarmine brand of basketball. They're going to be well coached.
Right.
They're going to be smart.
Right.
Probably everybody on the court is going to be able to shoot. So I think it'll
Right.
be an interesting matchup. Definitely no cupcake, but from a talent standpoint, I don't think they come close. This should be, I would say, I don't want to get too arrogant, too cocky, but a 10 to 15 point win for Louisville, as
Yeah.
long as they played their brand of basketball, just based from a talent standpoint. So not too concerned, but I think it's a good test, a good, don't want to say warm up game, but a good first game to face good, solid competition, but a team that you should be able to beat.
Yeah. I mean, there's names, if you just go down the list, Dylan Penn, if you remember, was, one of the, one of the better players in the area at the time that he was at Bellarmine a few years ago. Braden Hobbs, Ben Carlson is the guy from Utah. Alex Cook. I mean, all of these guys, Adam Impard, these are all guys that are multifaceted, not crazy athletic, but can do a lot. I mean, look, there's a guy from Coastal Carolina, Jenikachua. Jenikachua, I don't know. Do you know how to say this name? Last name
Absolutely
is
not.
Ojiako.
No idea. Nope. Not going to even
Uh,
try that one.
you know, I don't know much about Ojiako, but I know that he's a 6'10" dude from Coastal Carolina. So
Mhm.
they have some big bodies on this squad. And look, they're not coming to mess around, all right? Like, they're filling in some of the gaps with a guy from Oregon State, a guy from, like we said, from Utah, a guy from what did we just say? Coastal Carolina. So like Miami of Ohio, Antonio Ballard. Again, a lot of these guys, I'm not super familiar with their games, but I have a feeling that they bring a lot of the same intangibles and same skill sets as what you saw at Bellarmine. And then their head coach, make sure I get this right here, George Suggs. Any familiarity with George Suggs?
He kind of sounds like a former Louisville football player from like 2010.
That's
Is that
Greg
Greg
Suggs.
Scruggs? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But no, I mean, you know, it would not shock me at all if this is a close game. like not in the least. I think that's what you have to come to expect. Um, with a lot of these guys or with a lot of these games in TBT is they set this thing up so that it's going to be close at the end, and you're going to have to make plays to win. And that's the best part about the Elam ending, and something I think that guys had to adjust to last season. So I mean, if I'm sitting here filling out a bracket, though, I would say that it's when you look at matchups that you'd want to draw, aside from playing in Bellarmine's current home arena. I don't think there's many teams in this tournament that you would more want to play than this Bellarmine team, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think first round, don't want to look over it, but it should be a pretty easily winnable game. Second round is where I think maybe our toughest matchup comes
Yeah,
in the whole
yeah,
entire region.
very potentially. I was going to say, by the way, real fast before we move past United, which is Bellarmine's alumni team, George Suggs is the head coach for the McKendree Bearcats. I don't know if they're D2 or D3. I'd have to look that up. But there you go. A little bit of information about George Suggs. In his first season with the Bearcats, he led McKendree to 14-12 overall record. They play in the GLVC, which is Division Two. And then, yeah, I'm just reading down his resume here. But sounds like a guy with some coaching experience.
Mhm.
So you know that's not not something you could say about all of these teams. So
Yeah, no, he's
should
no
be
Scotty Davenport though, so we're good there.
he's no Scotty D, which is dodged a bullet on that one, but seems like a guy who knows what he's doing. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, round two, Louisville's going to face either sideline cancer or VBL. Now, what's your take on this game? Sideline cancer being the 3 seed, VBL
Yeah.
being the 6 seed. What do these teams bring to the table?
All right, let's start off with VBL. That stands
Okay.
for Venice Ball League Winner. So they went and held I believe it's a 1-day tournament at Venice Beach, and
Yep.
anyone could join in it. And whoever won that tournament got a spot into the TBT.
Really?
So yeah, so kind of cool. I would not expect a ton of talent to come from that. Obviously, some talented hoopers, but nothing compared to former pros and former college stars. A team called the Underdogs won the tournament.
Okay.
Um, I watched some highlights of the tournament. Athletes, hoopers, very street ball. Um, I cannot imagine that they beat this team. I cannot imagine they beat
Yeah.
Sideline Cancer. I don't know these dudes. I couldn't find a roster. If you go to the TBT site, there's no
Mhm.
players on it yet.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I would be this Sideline Cancer team is very good. I would
They
be
are
very
good.
shocked if this VBL team won.
They are concerningly good. How about
Yes.
that?
Yes.
I mean, and I mean, let's just dive into sideline cancer. I mean, I think that's it's difficult to say this. It's just like preparing for the NCAA tournament. You think you know who's going to win. Last year, we thought we knew who Louisville's second round opponent would be, and then there was an upset, and then all of a sudden you're playing the 6 seed and or 7 seed. Excuse me. I think it's the no, it's the 6 seed. I apologize. You're
Yeah,
playing a
yeah.
6 seed, and it's a quick adjustment, a 2-day turnaround, and you got to figure out who the heck is on the other roster and what you have to prepare for. But Sideline Cancer is a team that's been around for a while and made it as
Since the
far as the
beginning.
championship game. Was that in
Mhm.
the TBT bubble? Is that right?
Yeah, that was 2020. Yep.
Okay. So tell us about this team a little bit.
Yeah, they are OGs to the tournament. They were a team that was in the very first TBT where like you heard about it. You're like, oh, what is this? Oh, that sounds so cool. Like they were in that original one, I think 11 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
They are 16-10 all time in TBT. They've made it to a record 6 Sweet
Mm-hmm.
16s, made it
Mm-hmm.
to last year's Sweet 16, and they lost to Heard That, which is that Marshall alumni team that has Jared West on it, former 1-year Louisville solid player. But I was looking at their roster. They bring back some dudes, but like it's not like this team has been the same team since 2000 and
Right.
whatever 14. They're bringing
Mm-hmm.
in new dudes, but they have a great mix of like talented players, but also dudes that graduated college 2 years ago, 3 years ago, as
Right.
opposed to these former incredible players that were great 12 years ago. So
Right.
if we go down the list, I basically found 5 dudes that I'm like, damn, he might be a problem. We've
Yeah.
got Alonzo Verge, 14 and a half points
Mhm.
per game, 5.5 assists per game at
Mhm.
Nebraska 2 years ago. Just played last year in Kosovo, which I don't know where that is, but he averaged 18.4 points per game. We've got Marcellus Erlington, played 3 years at St. John's, 2 years at San Diego, put up 17 and 7 at San Diego in 2023. Now is playing in Israel's top league, averaging 16 and 6. Keith Braxton played for St. Francis, which I know is not a huge name, but put up 18 points per game there in 2020, is now in Sweden's top league, putting up 11 and 9.
Hmm.
Jermaine Morrow, just living, walking bucket. I kind of remember this name just because of how many points he put up. He averaged 25 and 6.5 assists per game at Hampton in 2020. So like led all of college basketball in scoring or was close to it. Is now playing in
Okay.
Slovakia, averaging 15 points per game. And then Jaron Holmes played at Iowa State 2 years ago when they were bad and put up 13 points per game, is now in England's top
Mhm.
league, putting up basically the same stat line, 13 points per game. So like dudes that were solid in college and dudes that were in college less than 3 years ago. So that's why they're so scary to me.
Yeah, I mean, and teams that I look at like this, I'm always looking at players that are experienced in TBT.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into this in a second, but I think that's a major leg up that Louisville has on the competition versus Bellarmine and Kentucky. Should it go that far? Because there's never, outside of the first couple of seasons, there's never really been a team that just joins and has immediate success. It takes a year or two to kind of get things under your belt, figure out the style of play, figure out what works and what doesn't, what players work on your roster, who don't. Just figure out exactly what's needed. Get adjust to the schedule. There's a lot that goes in and comes into play, and a lot of these guys have been on and off of teams in TBT. Like Jaron Holmes was a member of some very successful teams in the past. So yeah, I mean, Louisville would have their hands full for sure. I do, and we can get into this in a little bit as well. But I do have confidence that Louisville has a lot more talent than any of the first three teams that they would play, and I think that there's a good enough rapport there that can ultimately supersede anybody having significant experience, especially when you have guys like Chris Jones, who was an absolute baller last year in TBT. When you have guys like Russ Smith, who hit the Elam Ender in the first game, and obviously one of the best players in school history, Peyton Siva, a guy who's coming back healthy. He was injured a season ago and kind of playing through some, working through some, as you become an old man, that's what happens. You just get injured more often. And then adding two guys in David Johnson and Montrezl Harrell, who, you know, are fresh out of the league. So you got a lot of quality players there that can ultimately, overcome maybe some of the experience of some of these guys playing together. But yeah, I mean, this is like Silent Cancer is kind of like the old head league, right? Or the old head team. Like they're just those guys that are just going to be really annoying, play really sound fundamental basketball, and you're gonna have to beat them. You're gonna have to come out and earn it. And with that Elam Ender, there's gonna be a lot of pressure. It's like playing at the park, and you got to lead, and guys are doing whatever it takes to make sure that you don't get that last bucket. When you're playing 21 and there's like six guys, 10 guys out there, and everybody's like, oh shit, Jake's got 19. Like everybody tackle him. Everybody, do whatever it takes to make sure that he doesn't score. You know, it'll be something like that. So, uh,
Yeah, I think the only thing that scares me about this team, I mean, obviously the experience they have in this tournament, but it's the youth. I think if something happens to where Louisville loses that second round game, it is because they just got ran out because they're just so young and Louisville's roster is so much older than that. Also, my cat and dog are trying to kill each other. So sorry if you
uh,
just heard hissing
no,
and roaring.
I figured they were trying to make babies or something.
God, I hope not. We don't need any more. We got 3 animals in this house, and
Yeah,
that's
well,
like
I think
too
that's
many.
illegal in all 50 states too. So,
Not in Kentucky.
um,
All right. So third round. We're
Yeah.
probably not the best prognosticators. If anybody listened to our NCAA tournament predictions, I think
Oh
we
my
ran through it and
God.
just ripped
Yeah.
off our picks. I think we
Yeah.
picked like maybe 40% correct, if that.
Oh my
Uh,
God. Yeah. Well, somebody had TCU in the championship game, so
it felt right. I also graduated from there, so that was you shouldn't have let me do that.
Hey,
They were close in that first round game though.
they were.
Uh, but this, if I had to guess, looking at the teams, I just only looked at the one seed in this region, Team
Hmm.
Diesel, which is a team they haven't always been called Team Diesel,
Right.
but Shaq is now their GM manager, whatever. So that's their new name.
Right.
But they've been in the TBT for 5, 6 years, I think. They're 11-5 all
Hmm.
time. A lot of really former, like I'll read off the stats of these former college players. Incredible stats. Like you're like, holy shit, but
Hmm.
they're old.
Right.
Like I think their most recent graduate is from 2018. You've got dudes in this
Right.
team that graduated college in 2008,
Hmm.
2012, 2014, 2016. They're
Right.
really good, but they are old, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, uh, BJ Johnson, like you said, looks like their youngest player. And I remember him back from the Syracuse
Yeah.
days as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, was a quality player back then. Some of the names I'm not super familiar with, but I am familiar with Jarrell. Is how you say it? Jarrell or Jarrell Eddie?
I
Um,
don't know. I remember he played at Virginia Tech, though. I do remember that. That's it.
yeah. And I remember him being a pain in the ass, is what I
Yeah.
remember.
The one dude I will
Um,
say that I remember from this is John Jenkins. Used to play at Vanderbilt in like I think he
yeah.
graduated 2012. Dude was disgusting. Like 20 points per game was the reason Vanderbilt was any good. Had like
Hmm.
I want to say like an 8 year career in the NBA on and off. And I remember I'd see him on 2K rosters and he'd be like your 15th round pick in a new franchise. And he would just be a bucket as like a 61 overall. Um, Dude was disgusting in college. And even though I think he's like 33, 34 now. He was just in the G League for part of
Hmm.
last year, and he put up 18 points per game in the G League. So, though this dude has a lot of seasoning to his game, he is still an absolute bucket. So, if there's anyone on this team that I would be afraid of, it would definitely be John Jenkins. But I mean, BJ Johnson averaged 21 and 8 at LaSalle in 2018. Isaiah Miles averaged 18 and 8 at St. Joe's in 2016. Jarrell Eddy 13 and 5 in 2014 for Virginia Tech. Kyle Hines 19 and 9 rebounds at UNC Greensboro in
Hmm.
2008. Jesus Christ, give this man an AARP card. Why are they putting him in this tournament? And then the interesting one, of course, because it's Shaq's team, Sharif O'Neal's on the team.
Hmm.
Uh, it like long time disappointment, honestly, is the way I remember him.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of those players, he was, I wouldn't even say like Bronny James esque. It was more like, you know, kind of a higher rated recruit because of his father. I mean, he had that size and, athletic skill set, but never even, remotely close to being like a guy who could be a role player in the league or something like that. So, definitely an interesting addition. Now, I don't know if Shaq is just strictly the owner. How involved he's going to be. Will he be in Freedom Hall? Is this a guy that's going to be, trying to make amends for the Denny Crum story where, he didn't come to Louisville because he wasn't guaranteed a starting spot? I don't know if you ever heard that story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, that's a definitely would be an interesting matchup again, that's another one of those. It's similar to some of the teams Louisville ran into last year, where there's a bunch of these old heads where it's like, all right, they're quality players, but this is a team that we should beat. Like, I look at that's the thing. I mean, I look at any of these opponents and I'm like, yeah, oh, I remember that guy from college. He was a baller. This is a guy to look out for. But as a team, can they overcome some of the athletic deficits that they might have, or some of the lack of depth pieces like a team like the Ville has. And speaking of which, I have gotten official confirmation that Derek Walker is a part of the Ville TBT team, and not only that, but those in the know think that this is a guy that's going to play a lot.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, he's one of the younger dudes we have on our team, and literally, like I said, just put up like a baby triple double. Obviously, not a triple double, but put up 13, 7, and 4. Like for college, that's
mhm.
incredible
That's
for a big
quality.
man to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I would not be surprised at all. And he's got young legs, so I'm excited for him. Also, I
Yeah.
will say, feel a little bad. Talked crap about Sharif O'Neal. I remember he did have that heart condition, which did he was at UCLA, and then
God,
he
you
had the
dick.
heart. I know I'm a dick. He had the heart condition, and then I think he had to sit out for a year, and then he
Mhm.
played. Then he transferred to LSU. He never averaged more than 3 points per game. He didn't get drafted or anything. But sorry, I'm kind of a dick. I shouldn't have talked crap, but
Come on.
my
Yeah,
fault.
we're talking shit about Sharif O'Neal and Bronny James. What do they have in common? They're both sons of NBA superstars, and they both had heart condition. So there you go. Bingo.
Fauci, is that you?
Fauci. Yeah, I was about to literally. Why was that the first thing I was about to say? Is who's going to comment something about not taking a vaccine or something like that? So,
Yeah.
uh,
Unfortunately, as per their argument, Sharif O'Neal's issue was in like 2017, 2018. So
yeah.
I
Sorry,
don't know where they're
sorry.
going to go there. All
Long
right.
before the Fauci ouchie.
Yeah. Last one. Again, prognosticating is not our thing. We know this.
No,
Round
no.
4, there are what, 16 different teams that could, if Louisville makes it that far,
Yep.
be our round 4 matchup.
Yep.
So taking a guess as to who that would be asinine. It would be silly. But
Yeah.
the team I want it to be, because I want to beat the shit out of them, is La Familia.
That's right. Yeah. This is an American team, guys. Come on. Let's at least speak English.
Yeah, I was looking at their team page, and like they've got names that everyone knows: Aaron Harrison,
Sure.
Daniel Orton, Deron Lamb, Eric Bledsoe, James Young, Marquise Teague, Reed Travis, Willie Cauley-Stein. And I was like, damn, that's kind of a
Hmm.
tough team. Like that, those
Yeah.
are some big names.
Hmm.
I looked more into it. I'm not afraid at all. Like it would be Louisville's probably second easiest game if they had to play La Familia. I'm looking at these stats.
Yeah.
We've got Eric Bledsoe is like the one dude who I would be worried about. He's still putting up 16 points per game in the CBL for the Shanghai Sharks.
Mhm.
Besides that, James Young averaging 4 points per game in Italy. Willie Cauley-Stein averaging 9 in Italy. Marquise Teague averaging 4 in Greece. Daniel Orton hasn't played professionally since 2021. Deron Lamb averaged 11.5 in Italy's second league last year. So I mean, these were dudes that were nice, but they don't worry me in the
You
in
didn't
the
even
slightest bit.
mention you didn't even mention the baller that's going to just come in and take over. Enos Cantor's little brother. Come on,
Oh, is he
bro.
on the team?
Yeah, they just added him like 2 days ago.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I
Um,
didn't see his name on there. I thought you
yeah,
were going to say Brad
unbelievable.
Calipari.
That would be incredible.
That would be.
Absolutely incredible. But no, I mean, it would be fun to see just because of the matchup. I don't think, like I said earlier, it's difficult. I mean, we saw that last year with Louisville. It's difficult to finish these games off. And, I can't foresee a situation where this Kentucky team makes it that far. And if they do, I mean, I really like this matchup for Louisville. Like you said, Eric Bledsoe, I would say, is probably by far their best player on this team.
Mhm.
I mean, he was a significant role player in the league for a while. Um, you know, and like you said, 16-6 basically in China, nothing to sneeze at by any means. They do score a lot in China. Ask Russ Smith about that. Um, but I mean, I don't know. I'm looking at this roster as a whole. There's not a lot of guys, and it's tough for Kentucky's situation, right? Because they have all these guys that are in the league,
Yeah.
and not a ton of guys that a lot of these guys are guys that spent time in the league or
Mhm.
high level professional basketball, and now they're kind of like on their way out. Um, but I mean, this is a pretty old team, but
Yeah, I was about to say age is tearing them down because if this team was there 5 years ago and you had
mm-hmm,
Bledsoe in his late 20s, James Young at
right.
23, Marquise Teague in his late 20s, Willie Cauley-Stein at 27, like
Mm-hmm.
then this would be a team to be reckoned with. Also, do you remember Archie Goodwin played in the TBT last year? Hey, hold
Yeah.
on. Get the wire out of your mouth. Sorry, she's trying to eat the wire. Daisy says hello again.
Hi,
Um,
Daisy.
but Archie Goodwin was in Louisville's regional last year. I cannot
Mm-hmm.
believe they didn't add him. Dude was a walking bucket in the TBT last year. I cannot believe,
Yeah.
unless he's just already with that same TBT team that he was last year. I can't believe they
Yeah.
didn't add him because he would scare me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Reed Travis at 20 years old would scare me, but
Yeah.
Reed Travis at 28, Japan
Reed
league
Travis wasn't even
star.
20 years old at UK.
Yeah, exactly. So, um, not something I'm super concerned about. I mean, Willie Cauley-Stein, was a quality player in the league for a while, but
He's fallen off a
is
lot,
that
and
something
I
you're
mean,
concerned about? I don't know.
no, I mean, and it's not surprising too because his build is athletic big man. Like that was his game. Like there wasn't really a lot of skill to his game, and those kinds of
Right.
guys never really age well in professional basketball. So it's not surprising at all.
I don't want to be hater guy. Like I want to
I will
get
be. Don't worry, I will be.
yeah. I'm not normally a hater. Don't worry, watch me. Yeah. I don't want to be that guy, right? Because like maybe this does turn out to be a really good team, but I don't think it's like what people are billing them to be. And I think the response from UK fans buying tickets um, kind of is on level with what their expectations for this team is, which is
Mhm.
I can't imagine them winning 3 games
Yeah, I was
against.
I was gonna say I think they lose within the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, and again, we're gonna sound like haters. Like there's nothing, there's nothing that we could say that isn't glowingly positive that's gonna make us sound like haters. But looking across this roster, I just don't see how they fit together. I don't see this being a cohesive quality team. And based on the age of these players and their performance in the pros, I don't know. I mean, I could be totally off base here. But like you have like down low, like I think Louisville would destroy this team. Like Willie Cauley Stein's probably your starter, but you have Daniel Orton and Enos Cantor's little brother. Like, is that's what you have down low? I mean, I don't know who's the number 2 guy on this team. Is it James Young? I really liked James Young when he was in college, but
I mean, he scored 4 points a game last year in Italy. Honestly, the number 2 guy, Aaron Harrison, put up 13 a game last year in Portugal, or maybe
yeah.
Reed Travis. He put up 17 a game, but that was in Japan, which is not well known for having great professional basketball leagues. Maybe
Mhm.
someone like that. I don't know. It's hard to tell. Maybe it's Nate Sestina. Who knows? Maybe it's some dude that only played there for 1 year that's still young. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't I don't see it personally, but again, that's probably not a completely unbiased opinion. I don't know. Does anybody from that side of the bracket are there any other teams that stood out to you at all? Or I mean, we'll have a conversation between now and then, anyways.
Yeah, the
But
big one is heard that. I know they made it. Was it
mhm.
Final Four last year? I can't
They
remember
won it
how
all, I believe. Or
they won it all. Okay,
yeah.
I remember I kind of stopped watching as much once Louisville lost, but I knew they
Right.
made it far. I mean, they're the 1 seed. I didn't that suck. They won the championship and they have to be in the Lexington regional. It's kind of crazy, but whatever.
Yeah, and maybe
Um,
I'm totally off base here. I mean, let's check it out here. You can stall if you have anything else to say.
no, I was
But
looking at this. I was looking at the same thing as you.
yeah, I mean,
They made it. Okay, I was right. Yeah, they made it to the semifinals last year. So they made it
oh
to the
shit.
Final Four
Okay,
last year.
okay. So I,
Um,
I remember them playing in a bunch of significant games. Who
mhm.
was it that ultimately went on the win last year?
Oh, hold on. I know this. Was
Was it
it?
the was it North Texas?
I think it was Bleed Green. Yeah, Bleed
Yeah,
Green. Does that sound right?
yeah, Bleed Green.
I
So
believe it was Bleed Green.
yeah,
Uh,
so a Final Four team that has to play in the Lexington Regional. So they're a 2 seed or no, they're the 1 seed, right?
yeah, they're the 1 seed in
Lexington
theirs.
Regional. I understand that. I mean, from a ticket sales perspective, the UK ticket
Oh yeah,
sales.
yeah, I understand why they did it, and I mean they're getting new fans there. If Kentucky's team does do well, I mean that's going to be huge, just like it's been here at Louisville. It'll give them another thing to cheer for
Mhm.
in the summer. So no, I can't blame them at all.
Yeah, man, I I think that's what excites me the most. I think that Louisville has assembled a team that is a perfect fit for this tournament. You know, I mean, with you have the addition of David Johnson, for instance, maybe the most talented, and also, see the youngest player on this team, maybe Dylan Avar. But I mean, as far as guys that are going to play significant minutes, I'd
Yeah,
say David Johnson is the youngest guy on this team, and
yeah,
he's more of a NBA prototype, right?
Hmm.
And so when you look at it that way, you say, okay, well, that might be the guy who is like the dude on this team. But I think it's built for more for like Chris Jones or Montrezl Harrell or Shane Mahanen. Like that's the type of tournament that this is, and that's what excites me is that it's not going to be necessarily your most athletic or uh, most versatile player necessarily. Um, there's a lot of different pieces that can do a lot of different things on this team. And now that we're talking more about the Derek Walker thing and that it's seems like it's a legitimate conversation to have, it sounds like you know it's gone very under the radar for obvious reasons because he's not a former Louisville player. But it sounds like this is a guy that could be this year's Nick Mayo, right? Like a
Hmm.
guy that nobody's really talking that much about. I mean, we did here, but locally, as far as what the storyline was, nobody's talking about Nick Mayo, and that's a guy that won you a couple games last season. So maybe Derek Walker's that guy. Sounds like he was a baller. And that was in 2022-23. So literally
23. Yeah.
he's just a season removed from college. So this is a guy that's 23 years old and seems like a legitimate opportunity for a guy like that as well. You put a guy like him and maybe Trez on the floor at the same time could be something fun to watch.
Yeah, I was
Before
gonna
we get
say
out of here,
last thing. Yeah,
oh,
yeah, you go
go ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was going to say before we get out of here, we don't want to talk starting lineups necessarily, but lineups that you want on the floor for the Elam ending. I don't know how. Would it be easiest to do it this way? You start out, you pick a player, and then I'll pick another player, and we can assemble our 5-man
Okay.
lineup.
Sounds that's literally what I was gonna say. Let's pick out our Elam ending
Yeah,
roster, or
yeah,
starting lineup. I think I mean, we'll go easy 101 here. David Johnson. I think he has to be on the court. Versatility,
okay,
3-point shooting, experience in the NBA at least. Youth. I think he brings you everything, and you can put him at the 1, you can put him at the 2, put him at the 3. So it gives you versatility too for this little 5-round mock.
yeah. I mean, Peyton, I love you, but I've seen a lot of these pictures and videos and stuff of these guys practicing for TBT, and I've seen they're old heads now. Like
Hmm.
that's how they dress and act. Like they're just kind of these like chiseled veterans essentially. In their early 30s, and I think that a guy like Chris Jones is a guy that I'd put on the floor next to David Johnson.
Yep.
I
Yep.
don't think you can bring like I don't see how you keep Russ Smith out of the game. But yeah, I mean Chris Jones and David Johnson would make a pretty formidable backcourt in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think like you just said, so we'll go. We got David Johnson. We'll say with this pick, I'm going to say at the 3. Then you do Chris Jones at the 2 or the 1, doesn't matter. And then I'm going to take Russ. I mean, we saw it last year. It's a guy that you have to have out there for the Elam ending. If not for all, is 8 points? Is that correct? 8 point Elam ending.
Mm-hmm.
If not for all 8 points, at least for the final 4 or the final
Right,
possession. Like that's a dude that is
right.
can score at any place on the court. So that's a guy I think you have to have out there.
Yeah, and talking to Russ just a little bit as well. They know what to expect this year. They know what they want to do differently. If you remember last year, Russ really kind of overloaded himself with responsibilities and only being back home for a limited amount of time, trying to take advantage of the business opportunities that came along with it, trying to meet as many people as possible. Maybe as Rick Pitino suggested on the internet yesterday that you know maybe a little bit too much bourbon. I have no idea to go along with that, but there's a lot of bourbon adjacent projects at least. So, um, you know, not saying that that's not something Russ Smith could do because he's a guy that used to freaking house Waffle House and then go drop 30. But yeah, my fourth pick, this seems like it probably should have been our first, is Montrezl Harrell. I mean, if you're so that would give us David Johnson, Chris Jones, Russ Smith, and Montrezl Harrell on the floor. Who would be your fifth guy?
Yeah, I can't believe it took us this long to get to Montrez,
Yeah,
but
that
I
was
knew he was going to eventually be on the team, so it didn't hurt my feelings. I think it's Nick Mayo. I
Yep.
think we saw it last year. I mean, he would slide perfectly into that 4, give you a little bit more size for that 4.
Mhm.
I mean, shoots, can play make, can finish at the rim, can block shots. I mean, 5-tool player, if we're making baseball analogies.
Right.
I mean, you could go Shinanu. I think you might be a little
Mhm.
pressed to score on the perimeter, a little bit too clogged up there. Same with Shane. But I think Nick Mayo makes the most sense there for that 4 spot.
Well, heard it here first. Can't wait for us to be wrong. But the 5 guys that we've chosen, if the game is on the line and you're in that Elam ending situation, we got David Johnson, Russ Smith, Chris Jones, Nick Mayo, and Montrezl Harrell. Um, Guys, thank you for tuning in. We will continue our coverage of TBT, hopefully as Louisville continues to advance and gives us something to talk about over these long summer days. Until next time, Starting 502 Podcast, go Cards, and let's get out of here.
Go the Ville.